To the Knowing Show. I am your host, Christene Marie. Y'all, happy Sunday. I am so privileged to be with you all here this morning. We had such a good show last night, just really surrounding how do we know what our purpose is? How do we find kind of the unique combination of the things that inspire us, that derive passion, that allow for us to then move in the direction of also utilizing our gifts? So it's not just being passionate about something, but it's really knowing what it is that we're called to do, having clear insight into what we're good at, into kind of the gifts that we were born with that make us unique from everybody else around us. And then we discussed, well, why are we usually afraid of using them? Why are we afraid and hide our light under a basket? And so as we were talking about that last night, we are discussing something that actually ties very much into that conversation yesterday. And I'm excited to have this conversation with you because so often we're not really asking ourselves these questions. We're just kind of moving through life quickly. And the reason why today's conversation is actually so applicable to yesterday's around why is it so hard to receive love is because it actually has a through line of vulnerability, like we talked about yesterday. To know our gifts means that there's actually a humility to examine what are all of the good and wonderful things about us, what does make us shine. Even on the show last night, we had a friend say, his parents actually really didn't acknowledge the gifts that he had growing up. And so because of our childhood experiences, so often the way that we interact with ourselves or the gifts that we've been given, or even our calling, much more so being able to receive love, given those experiences that really shaped us when we were children, it has such a direct correlation to how we show up today in adulthood. Do we have the ability to receive? Do we have the ability to show up? And do we have the ability to take up space? Because one of the best ways for us to love other people is to take our light and shine it on them, is to take up the space and bring beauty and joy and hope into these rooms that otherwise maybe there's somebody else who's actually kind of the one in the limelight that isn't sharing the spotlight, that isn't casting the light of love, that isn't embodying the gifts that is God-given. But somebody else mentioned in the chat last night, maybe it's the mechanisms learned for influence that could turn into manipulation. So in order for us to not just capitalize on the gifts that we were given, to, yes, have courage, to be able to shine that light, it actually needs to come from a deeper place, from a place where we've actually taken the time to tend to ourselves so that we really do have something to give. And this is where the concept of receiving love plays in. I want to just quickly review our lesson from A Course in Miracles today. We've been reading it mostly every single day this whole year. And lesson 187, it's just a summary, so it's pretty brief. It says, I bless the world because I bless myself. God's blessing shines upon me from within my heart where he abides. I need but turn to him, and every sorrow melts away as I accept his boundless love for me. There's a direct correlation between that which is within us and that which comes out of us. There's a concept that is, you shall know a tree by its fruit. So what is the fruit in our lives? Do we have the fruit of love and joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control? Do we have these fruits that are basically the promise for anyone who is inviting the spirit and presence of God into their lives? Guys, this whole conversation around what are our inputs have very little to do with, on Sundays or Saturdays, there's days of the week where religious people will go and spend time with their God. And this conversation around, well, what are we being filled up with, has to do with every moment of every day. And it's not even a religious discussion. It actually has very much so to do with what are we filling our minds? Because the quality of our minds so often determine the quality of our lives. So what am I filling my mind with? Am I intentionally receiving inputs that are ministering to me, encouraging me, speaking truth, speaking life? Are they amplifying my gifts? Are they kind of like turning up my dials for being sensitive to other people and loving them well? And am I increasing my sensitivity to be present here in this moment because of what I'm consuming? Is my input allowing me to actually be more of a creator? We talked about that last night too. Someone shared in the chat, basically to use our gifts is to create the impact in our communities and in our families. So we actually, in order to use our gifts, there's an aspect of creation that is necessary, but it all stems from within. What are we feeding ourselves? What are we giving ourselves? It's like food. We're nourishing our minds, we're nourishing our spirits, our souls, and our physical selves. I'd like to talk on the Knowing Show about the 4 intelligences, which is the physical intelligence, spiritual, intellectual, and emotional. So the quality of our inputs hits each one of these 3 or 4 things. So what is the quality that we're consuming that is feeding and nourishing each one of these? Is it life-giving? Lesson 16 on A Course in Miracles says there is no neutral thought. So are we actually consuming that which is life-giving and that will yield to us having return on our investment? So every input is an investment into ourselves. We are continuously investing in ourselves. And then the question is, are we having real fruit on that investment? What is coming out of us? What is the yield and return by way of our output? So what comes in comes out. So the input informs our internal system and then it comes out of us. So what is the quality of our input that is seen by our output? So this conversation around receiving love really, really has to do with considering, what are my inputs? What was the past as it pertains to my relationship with love to begin with? Did I have an environment and a place where it felt safe to receive love? Or was it a contingency? Was love a contingency, or was love transactional in your childhood? Was there, do this, then you will receive? Was it action-based? Was it performance-based? Was it based on your grades? Was it based on your performance as an athlete? Was it simply based on you shutting up and doing what you were told? My dad was talking about how he was raised the other day, and it very much so was, children are to be seen, not heard. And now we have a very different culture than the way my dad was raised. I was raised very differently than children today are raised. So if we understand the environment in which we were raised, we then can create new targets for growth. For example, if we know that we grew up in a very transactional based environment, then what would it look like to not just not operate there? We're not trying to just get neutral, but we're actually trying to set a new target. What would facilitate me to be able to receive love? What would facilitate, what new environment do I need to create? Again, going back to, we need to be creators, not just consumers. And this is where consuming can inform our creation. We consume something new, and we can even consume silence. We are constantly consuming, and we are constantly given the opportunity to create. The question is whether we're creating in someone else's, according to someone else's design, or whether we're originating something new. And then to that point, is that which we're creating life-giving? Same question of that which we're consuming. So to this whole conversation, we have these opportunities, but it's all based on, yesterday's conversation of, do we even know what we're good at? That is so important. But before we can get to that question, it's, do I even have the vulnerability and the ability to go inward and ask those questions and find out those answers? So going back to today's lesson, I bless the world because I bless myself. Y'all, receiving the love of God is actually one of the biggest blessings we could ever give to ourselves. And so if our relationship with God is very much so negative or colored by the past, then it actually is really important that we ask ourselves this question of, well, not just what was my relationship like in my childhood environment, but how does that show up today in the present? If my relationship with love was transactional, well, then it's more than likely that my own relationship with myself is transactional. So if I do enough, then I will receive the reward of, getting, the treat that I wanted, or buying myself something that I wanted, but it's only if I do enough. And then we end up being on that perpetual hamster wheel. So our relationships with our caretakers in childhood are likely mirrored to the relationship we have with ourselves today. There's a very strong correlation around how we were raised, and that kind of way of thinking it pulls it again with a through line, it pulls through into adulthood. We usually will engage that way with our partner and our kids, maybe even our bosses, maybe our employees, but especially ourselves. That's how we were taught to do things. That's our subconscious at the youngest age was consuming and then turning around and creating roadmaps in their mind, patterns and ways of thinking and being. And so, if we want to disrupt those old patterns and old ways of being, we actually have to go back and not just undo, but create something new. To have real change in our lives starts from that internal place of creating something new. So, when it comes to this question of why is it so hard to receive love, so often it's because we actually haven't done the work to understand our relationship with love in the first place. What were those environments? What were those not just environments, but core moments within those environments that really shaped the way that I think, the way that I approach the world, the way I approach myself? So understanding the past environments, understanding the past experiences, and then understanding how that shows up today, not just in my relationships externally, but my relationship internally with myself and with my creator. Because that both of those aspects around how do I engage with people now and how do I engage with myself now, how do I engage with my creator now, are going to have direct ramifications in who you are tomorrow and who you are for the rest of your life, unless we intentionally create something new by way of going back to the past, realizing the state of what is, and then identifying new targets. So in order to identify the new targets, then the question is, well, what would be the ideal? And actually allowing ourselves to kind of dream and envision something new, and then go forth and find models that we would want to replicate. Before I keep going, I just want to jump here in the chat. Brian, it's so good to see you. Nika, I'm so glad you're here, my friend. I know you said you might not be able to join us live, but I'm so glad that you're here. Louis, hello. Good to see you. Just reading through your notes. This is so interesting. Brian, I love you. Y'all, I would love to hear. I know that there's a few of us tuning in this morning. I would love to hear, what have been the ways that, what does love look like and feel like for you? Because that's another part of this whole conversation around how do I start receiving love? Well, do you even know what it feels like? Do you even know what it would mean to you? I was hosting a knowing retreat a year ago in, where were we? Vegas? I think we were in Vegas. So I was hosting a knowing retreat a year ago, and there were multiple couples there. And I asked them, what is your definition of love? And not only was the definition of love between the couples all different from each other, but within the husband and wife duo, there was a pretty stark difference sometimes of how they defined love. So here's the thing about definitions and terms is that I have my own definition. So when you say a word, I'm filtering it through my experience. So at the core, if we don't ever get to the core of what does love mean to me and what has it been exemplified like I had this realization probably 2 years ago that when I thought of getting married again, I almost felt like I had a strange, almost like PTSD response where I was like, my whole body shut down for that moment. And I was like, wow, I had no idea I had that kind of emotional relationship with the concept of marriage. And what that did was that shone a spotlight into areas that I needed to heal from. So each one of us has a relationship with love and that concept of love. And so it's important for us in order to get to this point where, like today's lesson is, I bless the world, which is our goal. We want to go in and be a blessing. We want to make things better because we're there. But we actually have to first bless ourselves. Do we even have a blessing to give? Are we doing the work to tend to ourselves, to fill ourselves up? And to do that so often is by way of receiving. And receiving can be such a vulnerable thing. So in order for us to understand our relationship with receiving and with love, it's going back to those core moments, whether it's in childhood or adulthood. And a lot of times our relationships with love and definitions of love have been skewed and tainted by our adult experience. So how does that show up in the way that I experience life today? And what needs to change in order for me to effectively be the one in the driver's seat around, now I know this type of love isn't love at all. And I had to do that. I had to realize that the love that I previously thought I had wasn't love. There's actually 7 different kinds of love in the Greek language. And they all have different meanings. And so, one's brotherly love, one's a familial love, one is kind of this universal altruistic love. Then there's actually love for yourself, which is kind of what we're talking about here. In order for us to have that universal love that mirrors the love of God for the world, I actually need to establish that kind of love internally and vertically, and then it can be extended horizontally. So in order to do that, we need to ask ourselves these questions of, well, what does love even mean to me? Am I in a place where I even can receive, or has my past experiences really tainted my ability to trust other people or be open to other people? Just jumping here in the chat, Goose Hunter, I'm so glad to see you. Goose Hunter, you asked a question last night that I wanted to get to, but I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go live. I think I'm going to go live tomorrow and talk about it then. So if you're up for it, I want to save that. You said, we know that the process of creation and impact is laborious and time consuming. Where do you find the optimal area where you can revitalize weakened tools of influence? So I'm excited to talk about that tomorrow morning. I'm going to go back to my normal time, y'all, of going live at like 9 a.m. Eastern, 6 a.m. Pacific. I may push that back to be 7 a.m. Pacific, but we'll see. I'm still kind of playing with times. But to that point, I'm excited to share that on Tuesday, I will be launching the Knowing Community, and I'm just so excited. We've been talking about this for the last 2 months, and it's finally coming about, and I'm actually going to dedicate all day working on it. So if you think of me, pray for me. I'm very excited. But I'm really looking forward to it because, one, I want to have more of like a two-way conversation. I want to see you, like actually see your faces and hear from you, and to have an ongoing conversation within the groups. Like, this chat can be so vibrant and so encouraging and so good. And I want that to be able to continue so that it's ordered and structured and it has themes. A lot of people have a lot of grief, and that deserves and warrants its own place to go and have those conversations. Others of us, we're talking about health or wanting to have and see real change in our lives. Oh, Brian says happy early birthday. Thank you. That's the date that I'm releasing the community. So I have my work cut out for me to make sure that we do it by my birthday. But thank you. Y'all, I'm super excited. I feel like I went through a lull over the last probably month with traveling and not being on at a consistent time. And I felt a revived sense of let's come back to the same time. And Brian, you've been so wonderful to jump on whenever I'm jumping on, and I'm so grateful. And I just want to bring more consistency for your sake and also for all of ours. But I'm just so thankful. So appreciate you, my friend. Y'all, thank you for joining. I know today was a small group, which was exactly as it should have been. So I'm always grateful for that. I will see you all tomorrow, 6 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Eastern, and we'll continue having amazing conversations. Talk soon.